Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Lowdown on Low Code. I'm Rob Koplowitz. I'm one of your hosts today. I'm here with my other host, John Rymer. As always, Lowdown on Low Code is brought to you by analysis.tech. If you like what you're hearing in Lowdown on Low Code, hit the like button, hit the share button. There's like-minded folks out there that are getting value from the podcast. We're delighted that they take the time to listen, and we'd love to expand that to more folks who might get value from this. Just a quick note about today's episode. So if you've been listening, number one, bless you. And number two, you've probably seen a pattern where for about a year, we were really focused on technology vendor executives. And we were just delighted to have some really great minds in the industry. But you've probably noticed over the last few months that we've kind of shifted our focus a little bit to more practitioner level and folks who are actually have expertise in implementing these technologies and understand the strategies around these technologies. And we're going to continue that today with a couple of friends, one old, one new, from NavLabs. So, hey, John, over to you. Let's get kicked off here.
Thank you, Rob. Great to be here. I'm John Rymer, analyst here at analysis.tech. And we are just thrilled to be able to invite our friends at NavLabs to come and tackle a really important topic today. So I'll start with you, Colin. Colin Teubner, because he's the old friend, although he's young. Rob and I worked with Colin at Forrester, and Colin was one of these young analysts that came in and just killed it. Colin just did a great job on automated process analysis and research, and has since gone on in his career to become a real practitioner. So, Colin, it's wonderful to see you, and thanks so much for joining today.
Yeah, great to be here.
And then we have new friend, Carson Thune, who is CEO of NavLabs. Carson, it's a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you a little bit in preparation for the session. And thanks so much for joining us to lend your expertise to the community.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
So, guys, the way we love to start these podcasts is tell us about your journey. How did you arrive at the point you are at right now? What's your background? What's your backstory? We've heard some really interesting ones. No pressure. So Larson, why don't we start with you on this one? How did you arrive as CEO of NavLabs?
That's a great question. It's kind of a long and winding road a little bit, but in some ways, I think it actually perfectly encompasses the spirit of low code, because I was kind of like the citizen developer before that phrase became popular in low code circles. But I was a finance major in school, and I was doing basically internal operational analysis for this security company based in the Washington, D.C. area. And I was the Excel guy. I was, VBA and these big, crazy Excel models. And, I didn't really see it at the time, but I was building software. Now, was it enterprise grade software? No, it was kind of like duct tape and bubblegum a little bit. But then a roommate of mine at the time was working at Appian, and they were hungry for people. They were growing, and basically Appian offered to teach me how to be a developer, how to be an engineer, and I leapt at the opportunity and had a lot of success. I should say that I glossed over. There was a lot of pain up front, candidly learning, going from a kind of Excel, VBA, and kind of learning application development, systems design on the fly. But once I kind of got my feet under me, then I got some big marquee wins, and kind of along the way felt like the partner ecosystem was a lot of it underserved, and then started NavLabs basically with the idea that every customer deserves a good outcome, and not all customers have unlimited balance sheet, unlimited budget to pay for that. And so we created NavLabs, basically founded on that idea, and here we are almost 10 years later.
Wow. Awesome. Colin, over to you. I've previewed a little bit of your journey, but
Yeah, the start of my career at Forrester, I worked closely with both you guys on some research, which included document management systems and rules engines and some things like that before striking off on my own as an analyst, where I covered BPM, business process management, which is one of the main precursors to the low code platforms that we know and love today.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left Forrester, I got into product management, which is where I learned Agile practitioner kind of stuff. The first company I worked for, which was Global 360, was later sold to OpenText. They went through a big transition for their internal software development from waterfall to Agile. And so that was really interesting and instructive. And then after product management, got a little fed up with that and moved over to the technical sales side. That's when I started at Appian. So I was at Appian for 8 years total, out here on the West Coast, working on the sales side, closing a lot of new customers. I started a little after Larson did, and we met there. So I knew about NavLabs when he left to go found it. And more recently decided it was time to come over fully to the practitioner side. And it's been great. And, my background, I did major in computer science. And so I was probably more technical coming to low code than Larson was. But now actually for the first time, I'm doing real software engineering stuff at NavLabs, which is fun.
Huh. Thank you. Rob, over to you.
Yeah, Colin's backstory is cool because we were there for a lot of it. So it's always great to see that. So, hey, Larson, let's start with you because we're going to explore a lot about the concept of low code and agile development today, which seems like peanut butter and chocolate, right? Like these things seem like they should go together. The nature of low code seems like it should be just a perfect match for agile, but not always. Sometimes it turns out to be a little more difficult than that. Why has this been more challenging than we expected?
It's a great question. I think actually, in a way, this challenge is becoming accelerated as the low-code platforms get better because now you can output code really, really fast. However, the fundamental challenge with Agile, or not challenge, but Agile is always seeking alignment and realignment on an iterative basis, right? Like every 2 weeks, you have your retrospective and your sprint planning, grooming, you're getting back in alignment if you've drifted off, say. But now with these new tools, especially kind of these vibe coding tools, which are getting us into this kind of brave new world, you can, 2 weeks is a long time. You can spend 2 weeks going very much in the wrong direction and creating a lot of output in that direction. And furthermore, while the actual code generation bit of like the software development lifecycle, if you want to think of it that way, is greatly accelerated by tools like Appian, Superblocks, whatever, there's a million, Google, Firebase. The actual input, what to build, is still a very manual process. We don't do sticky notes on the wall as much as we used to anymore, but like that is still a way that's done. And there's a digital analog of that now, so like Miro, but that exercise of story mapping, user journey creation, story writing, generating acceptance criteria that reflect your intention, all of those things are still very much manual processes. And so maybe when I started at Appian, when I started NavLabs, our proportion of grooming activities, I'll call them, or refinement was maybe 20% of the total effort of a build. Now it's maybe closer to 50% because we spend as much time, and Colin sees this internally, even like we're experienced Agile practitioners, and sometimes for our full stack stuff, we'll spend as much time talking about it, if not more, than we will actually executing on the thing that we've talked about.
Thanks, Larson. Hey, John, over to you.
Fascinating, Larson. So Agile, as you point out, Agile really started in the coding world as a way of achieving alignment and constantly recalibrating. So there's a lot of experience out there. There's a lot of groups that use Agile. They use it. They use the practices in various combinations and so forth. But there's a lot of experience. For an organization that has that experience, what's the best way you guys have found to translate that, to carry that over into low code? Because low code is kind of the new kid on the block when it comes to Agile. And Colin, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the agile practices you would use in a full stack or pro code development context, they all translate to low code to some extent, but some of them look really different when you get into the low code world. CI/CD or any of the DevOps stuff is a great example that works into agile in certain ways. But in the low code world, a lot of the decisions you might make about operations or architecture have already been made for you by the platform vendor. And that's true in the pro code world too. Like there's a big difference between writing C code and the DevOps you do for that versus, writing like Python or Ruby on Rails or something, and the amount of choices that were made for you by somebody who worked on the platform. The other thing is that, so Agile always will say you have a self-managed team and anybody on the team should be able to handle any task. And I think that's the dream, and the reality often is, well, somebody's the database expert, or somebody's an expert on the document management system we're integrating to, or they're better at front end code or back end code. And so in full stack, that may not really come to fruition as much as you'd hope. And in low code, it tends to be more closer to reality that, everybody on your team is going to understand most of what the low code platform can do and will be able to tackle any of those different tasks.
Interesting. Thank you, Rob.
So there's an aspect of this that I like to call assume a product owner, because that's easy, right? We have to have this concept of a product owner, and it's a very difficult. It's actually a very difficult role to fill, and it requires somebody who's got a big picture, somebody who is in a position to lead individual sprints. Larson, how do we go about finding these people? What are the characteristics that you look for in a really effective product owner?
It's a great question, and I think I'll answer it, and then I'll also explain kind of why we rarely encounter that person. But I think the characteristics that would make a really great product owner are primarily the ability to make important trade-off decisions and identify valuable features, and especially ordinal priority of value. So everything can be important, but everything can't be equally important, right? And so the number one thing has to be the thing that's going to deliver the most value. And I'd say the best product owners are the ones that are truly discerning about, hey, we can be lean here, and it's not forever. Like we'll get it in the next release, we'll get it in the next sprint, whatever. But let's get the most valuable features out there first. Now, in our world, in the low code world, we run into almost every product owner we work with, it's their first time being a product owner. So we're in, and this is I think probably common in probably all low code spaces, be my guess, because we interact so much with the business. So we're usually less involved with IT teams, though. Like we have to coordinate with them, or I shouldn't say we have to. We do coordinate with them. But the product owner is typically just a subject matter expert from the business. So they're a domain expert. They're transaction advisory if they're an M&A firm. They're a compliance officer from a bank. They're a clinical operator from a pharmaceutical company who knows how to take drugs to market. And one of the fundamental challenges that we see is we're trying to basically teach them a new language, which is, say, Agile Scrum. And we're asking them to articulate their business challenge or what they're trying to solve in this new language that they're effectively learning on the fly as we teach it to them. And so that introduces a lot of difficulty. And one thing, it's taken us 8-9 years to have this aha moment, but no one ever said I was a fast learner. But realizing that like these people shouldn't have to actually learn Agile Scrum. They're welcome to if they like to, but really, like if their sole interest is, hey, I have this business problem I'm trying to solve, trying to get this drug to market better with better auditability or whatever, like they shouldn't need to articulate that in the language that we can understand in order for us to go and build it. And so that kind of gets into some of the stuff that Colin and I have been working on lately of trying to use AI tools to sort of be this translation layer so that people don't have to do that. They to close that gap we were talking about a second ago of 50% of the project time is spent just discussing what to build and refining that idea. We're trying to shorten those cycles in the same way that low codes shorten them for the development bit.
Great. Thanks, Larson. Tongue-in-cheek comment, which we will revisit in a little more detail later. agentic product owner. But let's let's put the AI conversation on hold for just a minute. Hey, folks, if you like what you hear on Lowdown on Low Code, we're brought to you by Analysis.tech. So Analysis.tech is a group of folks who get together who really dig low code and process automation and the effects of AI on that world. Of course, there's John Rymer, there's myself, Rob Koplowitz. We also have Dave Marcus, who spent his years with Microsoft and K2 and built the partner channel at UiPath. We have Francis Cardin, and Francis started the first RPA company, OpenSpan, and sold it to Pega. We also have Rick Greenwald, who was one of the primary people in the data practice at Gartner. We have Andy Bartels. Andy Bartels was our chief economist at Forrester, who now works with us here with financial and economic planning around these areas. And then our close friend, Julie Osk, who is focusing on CX and UX types of issues, not an official Analysis.tech, but we do research with her together, and she's extraordinarily talented. So we'll break now from the commercial break and pass back over to you, John.
Thank you, Rob. So, Colin, we've talked about citizen development, and Larson, was interesting that was in your background. And this is a thing, right? There's a lot of activity of various forms of citizen development. A lot of it on low code platforms, and the way that those projects get structured is all over the map. It just varies all over the map. So, what from the world of Agile can be brought to bear to help organizations structure their citizen development efforts to structure them for greater success and perhaps even efficiency? Colin, over to you on that one.
So yeah, it's a great and complex question. Citizen development is a term I've never really liked that much because I think it sort of perpetuates this myth, which is that, yeah, just turn your business folks loose on this great platform we've built, and they're going to build you enterprise quality apps, which are going to just run themselves, and it's going to be wonderful. It's possible to realize some version of that vision. It is possible. It's not a total myth, but I think one big part of the myth is that it's a part-time job to go build stuff on a platform like Appian or Pega or any of these tools, when the reality is, much like programming languages, they have arcane syntax and a bunch of specific objects. You have to learn what they do, and you have to think about the architecture of the application. What I think the true part is, though, is that those tools are available to somebody who doesn't have an engineering background. They don't need computer science or programming experience. And we at NavLabs, and I know like at Appian internally, most of the practitioners do not have computer science degrees. They have some other kind of college degree and are able to pick this stuff up. So that, again, this is changing where AI is making it so that you don't need to know a bunch of arcane syntax to build stuff. But the flip side is, citizen development plus AI tools, vibe coding like Replit are getting people into an even worse version of the downfalls of citizen development that I talked about before. The missing part, which is maybe not strictly Agile, but certainly a concept that dovetails with Agile, is DevOps. And the more you look at DevOps and the more you understand it, I think the more you realize those are sort of the most senior developers in a lot of ways, right? If you think about what's hard about a big software programming project, like what's hard about building Google search? Is it having a website that displays a search box? No, that's not the hard part. Is it searching an index knowledge base to return results? Well, that's a little harder, but having, a billion people do that simultaneously, that's the hard thing about Google. And so I think, on a much smaller scale, the low code platforms, even in the world of AI, still give you tons of benefit on the DevOps side. Because as I said earlier, the vendors made a lot of the decisions for you. There probably are scale limits. You're not going to use a low code platform to rebuild Google, right? You're not going to use it to build 3D video games either. So the trade-off has always been you can do less much faster, but also it has guardrails that are missing from things like Replit, where people who just vibe code something on Replit are very likely to build something that's insecure and honestly not operatable in a secure way. And somebody who's using AI to build with more of the traditional low-code platforms that abstract away some of the code complexity instead of outputting code, those people are going to be able to build operable apps, and AI is going to accelerate it further. And then, what's missing, I think, is still the requirements piece. Your requirements are going to have to be good, or you'll have a garbage in, garbage out situation, just as you do when you send a requirements document over the wall to a bunch of traditional developers.
With requirements though, and Larson, you raised this with the unautomated front part of the software development process. One of the powerful ideas that we've observed over the years with low code was something that Clay Richardson and I back in the day called test and learn, where rather than write a long requirements doc and solicit feedback, and of course it's everybody's wish list. So they become these gargantuan bloated documents where everything, where everybody's hopes and dreams are expressed. So rather than that, test ideas in the small, test the idea in a minimum viable product or maybe a prototype, and go from there to. Do you find that there's some middle ground that really ends up being required between just sort of this very organic approach and a formal recording of requirements?
It's a great question. You're speaking my love language, by the way, right now, in terms of get it out there, get it testable, and then gather real feedback from real people, real users, real customers, and iterate on it from there. I'd say, I'll give you a consultant's answer. It depends. I think that if, like in our world, by and large, as much as I would love it to be that way, part of it is we're engaging with customers who, especially if they're a new client to us, we're having to establish ourselves and build trust. And so there's always this gap of clients feeling like I have to know what I'm getting, what I'm paying for. Like I have to there's some certainty I have to have. I'm not just going to write NavLabs $1 million check to, and as much as I'd love that, I think not because we're trying to harvest anyone's money, more so because that exact pattern, I believe down in my bones actually is the right one. But there's always this trade-off between, executives, boards need clarity, certainty for like, what's our ROI going to be? What set of features are we going to walk away with when we spend this money, and yada, yada. For internal engineering teams though, or even in a vacuum, in an ideal world, exactly what you said is, I think is what good looks like. You have a notion that something's going to create value. Maybe instead of spending 6 months building some value case and creating data or whatever, you have a low code platform. You can have that maybe in your user's hands, or like a prototype of it in a couple of days, in a couple of weeks. And so to actually market test those ideas, so I do believe that is probably also the future, that the companies who are slow on the uptake and really have to be sure and measure 1,000 times before they cut once are going to get left in the dust by the ones who understand that nothing is written in stone these days, right? Like just as you can create a lot of code in the wrong direction really fast, you can also compress. This is what we've been kind of doing, is like compressing the agile cycle. So like we run 1 week sprints now. I could see a world in the future where maybe that's even compressed further, especially as we get these tools that catch up, like the requirements, and then like feedback is another part of kind of the cycle that I was alluding to earlier. But yeah, I think to the extent that companies can, like I would encourage them to use that empirical evidence, like a testable framework, like create a notion and test it. Don't spend 6 months analyzing it and building a dissertation on it, because by the time you show up with your dissertation, 10 other companies are going to be there first.
But setting a sort of a basic level of trust obviously sets you up then for that kind of success. Thank you, Larson. That's great. Thank you, Colin. Over to you, Rob.
We're going to stick with you for just a sec, Larson. So, all right, I'm on board 100%, right? My company's completely invested in low code. We're standardized on doomaflachi.com, fine tool. We really want to start applying Agile principles. Where do I go? Do I start with, do I go back to the source? Do I go back to Ken Schwaber's writings? Do I look at tools that were originally designed for professional developers? Do I lean on the low-code platform itself? Where am I looking for resources if I want to embrace this in my low-code development environment?
This is a great question. And if you'd asked me that a year ago, I would have first pointed you to my favorite book in Agile Scrum, though I haven't read them all, is Jeff Sutherland's The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. I think it's great. I think he does a great job explaining the why. I will say, admittedly, I think he doesn't hardly mention Ken Schwaber at all, and even though they co-created it. So, not throwing stones, but, I think it's great content. That said, I myself learned, I think probably maybe still the best way to truly learn is I was lucky enough that one of my clients, a large banking client, had paid for an Agile Scrum coach to be embedded within our team. And they were coming from a very waterfall culture. So it was amazing actually to watch this company that was so ingrained in the old ways of doing things slowly warm up to, and then eventually become full kind of evangelists. And that was the beginning of my kind of Agile learning journey as a practitioner. I had read the Sutherland book actually on the way down to Charlotte, where the client was based. Actually, I didn't read it. I listened to the audiobook as I was driving along. So that plus the on the job coaching was for me, I think the richest. And then, that this experiential learning. The reality is a lot of clients, can't justify that cost, though I do also believe that there's a lot of data to support that high performing teams are, produce orders of magnitude more output, more quality output than low performing teams. But I'll save that soapbox rant for another podcast. But I would say in today's world, maybe go get the Sutherland book. If you can afford a coach, go get one. But I would say use your favorite LLM. They're really good. It's in the same way, I'm a big at-home cook. And in the same way you can use an LLM, be like, hey, give me a recipe in the style of fill in the blank with your favorite chefs, Ottolenghi or, Samin knows, or whatever, right? You could do the same with Agile. It's hey, in the style of Sutherland, in the style of Schwaber, whoever your favorite Agile people are, if you're new to LLMs, you could start there and then, have it recommend to you even, thinkers in the space, which I may not even be aware of, because honestly, I've been in the practitioner game so long now that I'm not even at the bleeding edge of, hey, what are people doing? And because I feel like I've internalized these frameworks now and I've sort of adapted them to our own use cases. But I would say probably start with the LLMs. I mean, just about every question I have on earth these days starts there now.
Maybe what we're doing as good practitioners, Larson, is the bleeding edge of Agile practice. I think that's what I like to think.
Maybe so.
Well, certainly practitioners are where you will find all the blood in my many years of consulting. Hey, John, I think we got time for one more.
Yeah, just brief follow on. Colin, would you add any resources from your experience as a practitioner?
Yeah, but I think there is formal training. When I was at Global 360, as I mentioned in my intro, and we did the transition from waterfall to Agile, they bought the Rally software product, it still exists. I think it's mostly dead. Broadcom owns it, so we all know where that leads. But that came in with a lot of consulting too. And it was the Agile coach type of thing that Larson was talking about, as well as upfront sort of formal classroom training for all of the developers, which I think led to their buy-in. I mean, Agile is more for developers than it is for management, probably. I think it ends up helping management too, but it's easier to get the developers to buy in than the management. The management wants the certainty of, here's a 300-page requirements document that says what we're going to get. And even though it's impossible to hit whatever estimate you claim for the length of time to deliver the 300 pages, it still is what gives management the most comfort, right? This is what I'm signing on for. So anyway, the developer buy-in is easier than the management buy-in, I think, but having training on how to do it correctly was critical. And, we immediately saw a huge velocity improvement there.
I think you guys have both made the case that hiring a coach may look expensive, but it could pay huge dividends, depending where you are. Okay, let's move on. Thanks, guys. So let's get back to AI, which you teed up earlier, Larson. Very curious. You guys are obviously working on something. Our question was, does AI make this better? Does AI make it easier to adopt these good practices, these productive practices? And, you know, or does it make it worse? What have you guys seen? And what are you working on?
I can start a little bit, and then I'm going to let Larson talk more about what we're working on. So, on the, does it make it better? In the case of software delivery, whether that's pro code or low code, AI is making it faster. It's making developers more productive. There are still some skeptics about that, but I am using, IDE with integrated LLM on a day-to-day basis, and I can promise you that I'm delivering more code that ends up being higher quality. Granted, though, that I have to know what I'm doing, and I think if you turn somebody loose on Replit who's not a coder, you're going to get pretty low quality output, which may just pile up technical debt and make things worse later. So, okay, we're compressing the delivery timeline even further by using AI. That just means that even a larger percentage of our time and a larger weight of importance gets placed on the requirements and figuring out what is it we're going to have these robots build for us now that we have them ready to build good stuff. And I think Larson mentioned LLMs can help with that, although LLM is not going to do Agile for you. You still have to follow the practices yourself. And LLMs, how much agency they really have on their own, I think is also still an open question. So with that, I'll hand it over to Larson to talk a little bit about what we think the solution is to the requirement side of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think like Colin hit on, I think the answer is it making it better, is making it worse, is both, depending on, whether, like, basically I think about AI as like, it's this almost unlimited lever on whatever's on one end of it. So if there's something good on one end of it, it's almost an unlimited lever for good requirements, for good software, even for, for Agile Scrum practitioners, right? Like you can lever up your, or sorry, like a coach. Like I do believe, paradoxically, that in this AI era that we're in, actually focusing on the human element and making a really high quality human experience on the one end of the lever gets you the best output on the other end. So to that end, basically we built this, or we're building, I should say, we built an alpha version. We're kind of dogfooding internally, but it's not released into the wild yet. But we're building this tool to try to compress these cycles. Because like Colin said, especially with, with tools like Replit, which are great for, business people, lay people to sort of express an idea, or like, it's like a working prototype, but that's not, it's really not consumer software, and it's definitely not enterprise software. And so enterprise still demands the rigor that it always has, right? Like, if you're a bank or a pharmaceutical company, you're building a app to facilitate chain of custody to bring a drug to market. Well, you're going to have to answer to the regulators and explain, like, every feature by feature needs to map to regulations and to show that you've done your due diligence, and you cannot bypass that. However, the requirements, especially in that example, but in a lot of these examples, are fairly well understood. Like that one, maybe there's like a set of laws or regulations that sort of define, at a minimum, what that process needs to be. In our old world, we'd have to go and read line by line those regulations, and sort of as consultants, as Appian developers, as whatever, we'd have to go and sort of get like a little, not PhD, but like a little micro MBA and whatever the domain is of what our clients are, what their world is, right? And that's for us to try to build this bridge of understanding to get the alignment that Scrum is looking for to then go and build the right thing. Now we have to do much less of that bridge building, because we can see the persona of our product owner agent with domain expertise in whatever the domain is that we're operating in, and in that context. And they can basically understand, or the agent can understand what the product owner's domain is, and it also can understand from a Agile technical perspective, low code perspective, what that likely translates to. And so this isn't full self-driving. We're not taking our hands off the steering wheel here. But what we're effectively trying to build is a human in the loop workflow, where the time between idea in the product owner's head and seeing either a production working version of that, or at least like a working prototype, is compressed from, hours, weeks to, potentially minutes. Like that's probably more like the run in our crawl, walk, run. But already we're getting big time savings there. And then there's also, like, if you think about, I'm going to try to make a circle with my arms here. If like this part of my forearm is code generation, say, which like maybe in our old world is hands-on keyboard, team of 3, cranking out Appian code, crushing. It's great. That was 2 years ago. Now it's like, this is looking a lot more like human in the loop. It's looking a lot more like Google Firebase, like, kind of these enterprise like vibe coding tools, but still they rely on high quality inputs in order to return a high quality output. But then on the output side, you've got this. It gets to your question earlier, John, about get it out there and get feedback, test it. Right now, even like user feedback is a difficult thing. Like that lives everywhere. It's in chats, it's in Teams messages, it's in email, it's in Jira, it's in Excel spreadsheets. Like it's everywhere. It's in water cooler conversations. And so that also should rightly inform then what to go and build and feed back into your development cycle. I'm just making my little circle here. I hope you guys can see it. But in today's world, all of that context by and large is lost. Like as we do our best as consultants, we'll create a Google sheet, we'll create a database or whatever, but like the context comes from everywhere and it's difficult to synthesize and then prioritize that. It's a very manual exercise that we sit down with our product owners to walk them through. And so it's not just defining at the beginning what to build, but it's actually, and maybe more importantly, getting that out there, getting it in the hands of users, like you said, John, and then collecting, synthesizing, triaging that feedback to fill back in the back half of the development cycle, which is probably, I'd argue, maybe even the most important part. Like you get out there with whatever your thesis is, whatever your notion is, it's something's going to be valuable, and then you actually experience in real life what your real users, your real customers, your real partners, whatever, what they love, what they hate, and then your ability to take that and then turn it back into working software in a short cycle is what's going to separate you from your competitors.
Right. That's awesome. Thank you. I can't wait to see the tool. Rob, back over to you. Want to bring us home?
Yeah. Hey, guys, the folks, thanks for taking the time with us today. The name of the company is NavLabs. It's just to the right of Larson there in his video. It's nav-labs.com. Colin, Larson, thank you so much for joining us today. I really think there was a ton of amazing value in here for our listeners.
Great to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
guys, I want to add my thanks. You're helping people think of it that way. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your knowledge. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us, gents. I appreciate you.